"Excuse me, ma'am, the cleaning crew isn't scheduled until everyone deplanes." Those were the words that started a war at 30,000 feet. He saw a tired black woman in a hoodie and assumed she was there to scrub the toilets. He didn't know that the floor he was standing on, the oxygen he was breathing, and the very wings slicing through the clouds outside were all conceived by her mind. He was about to humiliate the one woman who could save their lives when the engine warning lights turned red. This isn't just a story about racism. It's a story about the most satisfying instant karma in aviation history. Buckle up. The automatic sliding doors of JFK Terminal 4 hissed open, inviting in a gust of biting November wind, but Jordan Maxwell didn't flinch. She was used to turbulence both in the air and on the ground. She adjusted the strap of her battered leather messenger bag, pulled up the hood of her faded Caltech sweatshirt, and stepped into the chaotic warmth of the departures hall. To the thousands of rushing travelers, Jordan looked like nothing special. Maybe a tired student heading home for the holidays, or perhaps a weary mother running on zero sleep. She wore gray sweatpants, scuffed sneakers, and no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy, utilitarian bun. There was no Louis Vuitton carry-on trailing behind her, no clicking of high heels, no aura of VIP. And that was exactly how she liked it. Jordan checked the time on her phone. She had 2 hours before Regal Air Flight 909 departed for London Heathrow. She wasn't just tired. She was exhausted in a way that settles deep in the marrow. She had spent the last 3 weeks in a wind tunnel facility in the Mojave Desert, overseeing the final stress tests for the new RA700 Stratoliner wing assembly, specifically the variable geometry wingtips that reduced drag by 4.5%. It was a project she had spearheaded for Boeing and Regal Air's joint engineering course. It was her baby. And tonight, for the first time, she would be flying on the very commercial jet she had helped design. She walked toward the check-in counters. The economy line snaked back and forth, a river of frustrated faces and heavy luggage. To the left, the first class, priority lane was empty, guarded by a velvet rope and a pristine red carpet. Jordan didn't hesitate. She ducked under the rope, bypassing the economy queue entirely. "Hey!" someone shouted from the back of the economy line. "Line starts back here, lady." Jordan ignored it. She kept her eyes forward, walking toward the counter where a young agent was typing furiously. "Excuse me," Jordan said softly, approaching the desk. The agent, whose name tag read Tiffany, didn't look up. She was busy chatting with her colleague at the next desk. "I can't believe he said that to you." Tiffany giggled, popping her gum. "Excuse me," Jordan said again, a little louder. Tiffany finally looked up. Her eyes scanned Jordan from the hoodie to the sneakers, and her expression shifted from bored to annoyed. She let out a heavy, theatrical sigh. "Ma'am, this is the first-class priority lane," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with that specific kind of customer service politeness that is actually a veiled insult. "Economy check-in is the long line behind you. You need to wait your turn like everyone else." Jordan didn't blink. She was 42 years old, held a double PhD in aerospace engineering and fluid dynamics, and had patents in her name that generated millions of dollars a year. She didn't have the energy for this. "I know where I am," Jordan said, her voice calm. She slid her passport and phone onto the counter. "I'm checking in for Flight 909 to London." Tiffany rolled her eyes, picking up the passport with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "Okay, but when the system rejects you, don't make a scene. I don't have time for scenes today." She scanned the passport. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type in a rejection code. But then, the screen beeped. A green light flashed. Tiffany's eyebrows knit together. She typed something else. Another beep. "Passenger, Maxwell, Jordan. Status, Chairman's Circle. Global Services. Seat, 1A. Tiffany froze. She looked at the screen, then back at Jordan, then back at the screen. The Chairman's Circle status wasn't just first class. It was a status usually reserved for celebrities, politicians, and the highest-ranking corporate executives. It was the kind of status that meant the airline would practically hold the plane for you. "Is there a problem?" Jordan asked, arching a brow. Tiffany stammered. Her face went pink. No problem. It's just, the system is a little slow today." She hurriedly printed the boarding pass gold cardstock with bold black lettering. She handed it over, but she didn't make eye contact. "Gate B32. The lounge is to your right." "Thank you, Tiffany," Jordan said. "And for the record, the line starts wherever I'm standing." Jordan took her pass and walked away. She felt a brief flicker of satisfaction, but she pushed it down. She knew the airport was just the gauntlet. The real boss fight was usually on the plane. She just hoped the crew on board would be more professional. She couldn't have been more wrong. The Regal Air Lounge was quiet, a sanctuary of soft jazz and clinking glass. Jordan grabbed a bottle of water and sat in a corner, pulling out her iPad to review the hydraulic schematics for her next project. She didn't touch the free champagne or the gourmet buffet. She just wanted to work, sleep, and land. When the boarding call came for Flight 909, Jordan waited until the very last second. She hated the gate lice phenomenon, people crowding the boarding door before their zone is called. As the final call for first class sounded, she gathered her things and headed to the gate. The jet bridge was cold. The smell of jet fuel and recycled air hit her, a scent she strangely loved. It smelled like progress. She stepped onto the aircraft. This was the Regal Air 787-9, equipped with the new suite class configuration. It was luxury redefined. Standing at the door, greeting passengers, was the senior purser. His nameplate read Gregory Niles. Gregory was a man who clearly prided himself on his appearance. His uniform was tailored to within an inch of its life. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His hair was gelled into a helmet of perfection, and his smile was as bright as it was fake. He was greeting a businessman in a suit with a warm, deferential handshake. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. Wonderful to see you again. Right this way to 2A. Mr. Henderson passed. And then, it was Jordan's turn. She stepped into the galley. Gregory's smile vanished instantly. It didn't fade. It was deleted. He physically shifted his body to block the aisle leading to first class, angling his hand toward the right-hand aisle that led to economy. "Boarding pass," he snapped, his hand extended, palm open. He didn't say welcome. He didn't say good evening. Jordan held out the gold cardstock ticket. Gregory didn't take it. He just glanced at her hoodie. "Ma'am, you're in the wrong line. Economy boarding is through the second door, but since you're here, just cut through the galley and go all the way back. Row 40 and above." "I'm not in row 40, Jordan said, keeping her voice level. "I'm in 1A. Gregory let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound designed to humiliate. "1A? Sweetheart, 1A is a suite. It costs $12,000. Now, please, you're holding up the line. I need to keep this area clear for our first-class passengers." Behind Jordan, a couple in expensive coats were waiting. The man checked his watch ostentatiously. "Gregory, is it?" Jordan looked at his name tag. "If you would just scan the boarding pass, we can all get moving." Gregory snatched the pass from her hand. He looked at it with a sneer, expecting to see a forgery or a mistake. He stared at the 1A printed on the front. "Where did you get this?" he accused, looking her dead in the eye. "I got it at the check-in desk, where everyone else gets them." "No," Gregory shook his head. "There's a mistake. This seat is reserved for our high-value flyers. Sometimes the computer upgrades employees or non-rev passengers by accident when the flight is oversold. But we have a full flight tonight." He turned to the couple behind her. "I am so sorry for the delay, Mr. and Mrs. Albright. Please, just squeeze past this. Individual. I'll have this sorted in a jiffy." He ushered the Albrights past Jordan. As Mrs. Albright squeezed by, she clutched her Prada bag tighter to her chest, giving Jordan a look of pure disdain. "You can stand over there," Gregory pointed to a jump seat near the galley, right next to the lavatory. "Wait there while I verify this. I'm not having you take a seat that doesn't belong to you, only to have to drag you out of it later. Verify it?" Jordan felt the heat rising in her neck. "It's a valid boarding pass." "It's a computer error," Gregory hissed, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Look at you. You're wearing sweatpants. You look like you just rolled out of bed. We have a dress code in first class. We maintain a standard here. I don't know who you know or how you got that ticket, but I run this cabin, and I say, you wait." Jordan took a deep breath. She could cause a scene. She could demand to see the captain. She could pull up her credentials on her phone and show him that she was the senior consultant for aerodynamics for the entire Airline alliance. But she was tired, and she knew that men like Gregory thrived on conflict. If she got angry, she became the angry black woman, and he won. He would kick her off the flight for being disruptive. She had seen it happen too many times. So, she moved to the jump seat. She stood in the corner, clutching her bag, while Gregory greeted the rest of the first-class passengers with champagne and warm towels. He treated every single one of them like royalty, and every time he passed Jordan, he pretended she didn't exist. She stood there for 20 minutes. Finally, the boarding complete chime rang through the cabin. The main door was closed. Gregory walked over to the flight computer mounted on the wall. He tapped a few keys, frowning. He tapped again. He couldn't find a reason to deny her. The computer was ironclad. He turned to her, his jaw tight. "Fine," he spat. "Take your seat. But put that bag in the overhead. I don't want it cluttering up the suite." Jordan walked to seat 1A. It was a beautiful, enclosed pod with a lie-flat bed. As she sat down, she saw Gregory whispering to a younger flight attendant, "Sarah." He gestured toward Jordan and rolled his eyes. Sarah looked over at Jordan, her expression sympathetic, but she nodded at her boss. Jordan buckled her seatbelt. "Just get to London," she told herself. "Just get to London." The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety video played. The massive Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 engine spooled up. A deep, thrumming vibration that Jordan felt in her teeth. She closed her eyes, listening to the pitch. Engine 1 is harmonizing perfectly, she thought. Engine 2 is a fraction of a hertz off, but within tolerance. It was a curse of her profession. She couldn't fly without analyzing the machine. As the plane taxied to the runway, the cabin lights dimmed. Usually, in first class, the flight attendants come around before takeoff to take meal orders and offer a pre-departure drink. Jordan watched as Gregory moved down the aisle. He knelt beside Mr. Henderson in 2A. "Mr. Henderson, we have the lobster thermidor or the Wagyu beef tonight. What can I get started for you?" He moved to 2B. "Mrs. Albright, may I suggest the Chardonnay? It pairs beautifully with the appetizers." He moved to 1B, the seat across the aisle from Jordan. An older man was sleeping there. Gregory gently placed a blanket over him. Then, he stood up, looked directly at Jordan in 1A, and walked past her back to the galley. He skipped her. Jordan pressed the call button. A moment later, Sarah, the younger attendant, appeared. She looked nervous. "Yes, ma'am. I wasn't asked for my meal preference," Jordan said calmly. Sarah bit her lip. She glanced toward the galley where Gregory was clattering plates. I'm sorry," Gregory said. He said he checked the manifest and you were listed as no meal service. Jordan laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "No meal service? On a $12,000 ticket? Does that sound right to you, Sarah?" "No, ma'am," Sarah whispered. "It doesn't. But he's the senior purser. If I override him..." "I understand," Jordan said. She didn't want to get the girl in trouble. "Could I just get a bottle of water? And maybe some peanuts?" "I haven't eaten since noon." "I'll get you the beef," Sarah whispered conspiratorially. "I'll tell him we had an extra. And I'll get you the good wine." "Thank you, Sarah." Sarah hurried away. Jordan leaned back. This was going to be a long 7 hours. The plane turned onto the active runway. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Bill Henderson. We're number 3 for takeoff. Weather in London is rainy and cold, typical for this time of year. We should have you on the ground in about 6 hours and 45 minutes. Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff." The engines roared. The force of acceleration pressed Jordan into the soft leather of the seat. Her wings flexed upward as they generated lift. They were airborne. The climb out of New York was smooth. But about 20 minutes into the flight, just as they were passing 15,000 feet, something happened that made Jordan's blood run cold. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. The plane banked slightly to the left, then corrected sharply to the right. It felt like a car hitting a patch of ice and the traction control kicking in. Most passengers wouldn't have noticed it, but Jordan did. She sat up straight, her eyes scanning the wing outside her window. It was pitch black, but the anti-collision strobe lights flashed every second, illuminating the composite structure. Flash. The wing was flexed. Flash. The aileron fluttered. "That's not right," she whispered. The plane shuddered. This time, it was noticeable. The fasten seatbelt sign, which had just been turned off, dinged back on immediately. Gregory's voice came over the PA, sounding annoyed. "Ladies and gentlemen, The captain has turned the seatbelt sign back on. Please remain seated. We're experiencing a little chop. It wasn't chop. Jordan knew chop. This was a yaw oscillation. The plane was struggling to fly straight. She unbuckled her belt and stood up. Sit down, Gregory barked from the galley. He was unbuckling a cart, getting ready to serve drinks to everyone but her. The sign is on. I need to speak to the captain, Jordan said, stepping into the aisle. Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It was the voice she used in boardrooms full of generals and CEOs. Gregory abandoned his cart and stormed over to her. He was tall, looming over her. Are you insane? You can't speak to the captain. Sit down immediately or I will have the authorities waiting for you in London. You are already on thin ice, lady. Listen to me, Jordan said, looking up at him with intensity. The plane is yawing. There is a discrepancy between the rudder input and the aileron trim. The flight computer is trying to compensate, but it's overcorrecting. If he climbs past 30,000 feet into the thinner air, the sensors will miss track, and we could enter a Dutch roll. Gregory stared at her. His mouth opened, then closed. He didn't understand a single word she had just said. To him, it sounded like gibberish. Dutch roll? He laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. What are you, a Google expert? You read a blog post and now you think you know how to fly a 787? This is a state-of-the-art aircraft. I know, Jordan snapped. I designed the aerodynamic profile for the wingtips. Now tell the captain to check the yaw damper servo alpha. Gregory's face turned red. He grabbed her arm. That is enough. You are disrupting this flight. You are scaring the passengers. Indeed, Mrs. Albright in 1B was looking terrified. Is she a terrorist? She whispered loudly. Why is she talking about the wings? I am moving you, Gregory announced. I don't care about your ticket. You are a security risk. You are going to the back of the plane, and I am having the air marshal sit with you. You touch me again, Jordan said, her voice deadly calm, and you will never work in this industry again. I am not a security risk. I am the only person on this plane who knows why it's vibrating. Suddenly, the plane lurched violently. A loud bang echoed from the cargo hold area, the sound of hydraulics hammering against their stops. Mrs. Albright screamed. Drinks flew off the trays in the galley. Gregory lost his balance and fell into the lap of Mr. Henderson in 2A. The cabin went silent. Then, the intercom crackled. Flight attendants, take your seats immediately. Captain Henderson's voice was tight, strained. We have a technical indication here. We are leveling off at 20,000 feet. Gregory scrambled up, his face pale. He looked at Jordan. Sit down, he screamed. Jordan sat. But she didn't close her eyes. She reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook and a pen. She began to write furiously. She drew a diagram of the sensor loop. She wrote down a specific code sequence. Override code. 77 alpha decimal 4. She ripped the page out. Sarah, Jordan yelled. Sarah was strapped into her jump seat, looking terrified. Come here. Sarah hesitated, then unbuckled and crawled along the floor to 1A. The plane was shaking continuously now, a rhythmic shuddering that rattled the teeth. Give this to the captain. Jordan shoved the note into Sarah's hand. I can't go into the cockpit, Sarah cried. It's locked. Protocol. Breach protocol, Jordan commanded. Slide it under the door if you have to. Use the emergency interphone. Tell him, Dr. Maxwell says, the yaw damper is in a feedback loop. Go. Sarah looked at the note, then at Jordan's fierce eyes. She saw something there, competence. Authority. Sarah scrambled up and ran toward the cockpit door. Sarah, no, Gregory shouted from his seat. Get back here. That's a violation. Sarah ignored him. She hammered on the reinforced cockpit door. She picked up the interphone handset. Captain, this is Sarah. I have a passenger. She says she knows what's wrong. She says check the yaw damper servo alpha. There was a long silence on the line. The plane shook again, harder this time. Then, the locks on the cockpit door clicked. The door opened. The heavy, reinforced cockpit door didn't just open. It was cracked slightly by the first officer, a man named Co-Pilot Vance avoided Vance. Let's go with Co-Pilot Miller, whose face was slick with sweat. He snatched the note from Sarah's trembling hand and slammed the door shut again. Inside the cabin, the murmuring of the passengers was growing into a panic. The plane was now doing a slow, rhythmic wallow, tilting left, dragging, then snapping right. It was sickening. A baby in row 4 started screaming. Gregory unbuckled his jump seat strap and marched toward Sarah. His face was a mask of fury. "You are finished," he hissed, grabbing Sarah's arm hard enough to leave a mark. "Opening the cockpit door in flight, passing notes from a crazy woman? That is federal interference, Sarah. I will personally ensure you lose your wings for this." "The plane is shaking, Gregory," Sarah cried, pulling away. "It's turbulence," Gregory shouted, though his voice wavered as the floor dropped beneath them again. "Now go tell that woman in 1A to sit down and shut up before I—" Click. The cockpit interphone chimed. It was the specific 3-tone chime that meant pilot to senior purser, urgent. Gregory smirked. "See? Now the captain is going to scream at us." He picked up the handset, putting on his most professional, sycophantic voice. "Flight deck, this is Gregory. Captain, I am so sorry about the interruption. I have the passenger contained, and—" "Bring her up," Captain Henderson's voice cut through the line like a razor. Gregory froze. Excuse me, Captain?" "The passenger who wrote the note. Bring her to the flight deck. Now." "Captain, with respect," Gregory stammered, glancing back at Jordan, who was calmly watching him from her seat. "She is unstable. She's been aggressive. I don't think it's safe to—" "Gregory!" the captain roared. "We have a critical flight control failure. The code she wrote on that napkin just matched the error log we can't even see on our main screens. Bring her up, or I'm coming back there myself." Gregory dropped the phone. He looked at Jordan. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax statue. He walked over to 1A. He didn't speak. He just gestured toward the cockpit with a stiff, jerky hand. Jordan stood up. She straightened her hoodie. She walked past Gregory without a glance, but as she passed him, she whispered, "Hold my water." She stepped up to the cockpit door. It buzzed open. She stepped inside. The flight deck was a cacophony of alarms. The master caution light was flashing yellow. The horizon line on the primary flight display was wobbling. Captain Henderson turned in his seat. He was a gray-haired veteran, usually unflappable, but his eyes were wide now. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Jordan Maxwell," she said, leaning over the center console, her eyes scanning the instruments. "I see you're losing the yaw damper on the secondary channel. You're fighting the autopilot, aren't you?" "The rudder is fluttering," co-pilot Miller said, his hands white-knuckled on the yoke. "We tried to disengage the system, but it won't latch off. It keeps re-engaging." "It's a logic loop," Jordan said, pointing to the EICAS screen. "The sensor thinks the plane is in a stall spin because of the vibration, so it's forcing the rudder to correct. But you're not spinning. If you don't kill the bus, the tail is going to snap off." The bluntness of her statement sucked the air out of the cockpit. "How do we kill it?" Henderson asked. "The standard disconnect switch isn't working." "It wouldn't," Jordan said. "It's a software bug in the version 4.2 update. I told the board to delay the rollout, but they wanted to save quarterly costs." She shook her head. "You have to do a hard reset on the flight control module C." "We can't reset the flight controls in midair," Miller shouted. "We'll lose all stabilization." "You have backup mechanical linkage for the ailerons," Jordan fired back. "You'll be flying a heavy glider for exactly 90 seconds. Then the system reboots, sees the sensors are fine, and you get your plane back." The plane lurched violently. A coffee cup slid off the console and splashed onto the floor. "We're losing altitude," Miller yelled. 18,000 feet. Captain Henderson looked at Jordan. He looked at her hoodie, her messy hair, her tired eyes. Then he looked at the confidence radiating from her. "Do it," Henderson said. "Show me what to pull." Jordan didn't hesitate. She squeezed into the jump seat behind the pilots. "Overhead panel, section 4. See the breaker marked FLT CRTL SEC? Don't pull it yet. You need to pull HYD Presley first to dump the pressure, or the reboot will blow the valves." "Dump hydraulic pressure?" Miller looked terrified. "Trust me," Jordan said. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, pull." Miller pulled the hydraulic breaker. The plane felt suddenly loose, heavier. The groaning of the hydraulics stopped. "Now the flight control breaker." "Pull it." Miller pulled it. Everything went quiet. The screens flickered. The autopilot disengaged with a loud wail. The plane dipped the nose sharply. Fly the plane, Jordan commanded. Stick back, use your trim. Henderson hauled back on the yoke. It's heavy, it feels like a tank. It's a 787 without computer assist, Jordan said calmly. It is a tank. Hold 20 degrees pitch. Watch your speed. She checked her watch. 40 seconds. The cabin outside must have been terrifying. The plane was swooping, heavy and sluggish. 60 seconds, Jordan counted. Prepare to reset the breakers. Flight control first, then hydraulics. Altitude 15,000, Miller called out. We're dropping fast. Steady, Jordan said. 70 seconds. 80. Come on, Henderson grunted, sweat dripping off his nose. Now, reset breakers. Miller slammed the breakers back in. Click, click. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the screens flashed bright. The hum of the electronics returned. The hydraulic pumps whined to life. System reboot. Checking sensors. Okay. Yaw damper. Active. Autopilot. Available. The plane snapped back to level flight. The vibration was gone. The rhythmic swaying vanished. It was smooth as glass. Engage autopilot, Jordan said softly. Henderson pressed the button. The plane locked onto its heading. Silence filled the cockpit, save for the rush of wind. Captain Henderson slumped in his seat. He took a long, shuddering breath. He turned around and looked at Jordan properly for the first time. My God, he whispered. We were minutes away from structural failure. The vertical stabilizer would have delaminated, Jordan corrected. You would have lost the tail. How? Henderson asked, wiping his brow. Who? Who are you? You're not just a passenger. Jordan smiled, a small, tired smile. I'm Jordan Maxwell. I'm the lead systems engineer for the 787 Aeroelasticity program at Boeing. I wrote the code for the variable wingtips. Henderson's jaw dropped. Maxwell? The Maxwell who designed the RA-700 retrofit? That's me. I read your paper on fluid dynamics in the Journal of Aviation, co-pilot Miller said, staring at her like she was a rock star. You're a legend. I'm just an engineer who wants to go to London, Jordan said, unbuckling the jump seat. Is the plane safe now? Yes, Henderson said. Thanks to you. He reached out and shook her hand vigorously. I don't know how to thank you. You saved everyone on board. You can thank me by getting us to Heathrow on time, Jordan said. And maybe, she paused, maybe have a word with your purser. Henderson's expression darkened. Gregory, what did he do? He tried to prevent me from helping you, Jordan said diplomatically, and he's currently convinced I'm a terrorist. I'll handle Gregory, Henderson growled. You go back to your seat. Relax. Order whatever you want. I'll make an announcement. Jordan nodded. She turned to leave the cockpit. When she stepped back into the cabin, the scene was chaotic. Passengers were crying. Flight attendants were checking for injuries. Gregory was standing right outside the cockpit door, looking terrified. When he saw Jordan emerge, his fear turned back into aggression. He assumed she had been kicked out. He grabbed her arm as she stepped into the galley. What did you do in there? He hissed. Did you threaten them? I saw the plane drop. You touched the controls, didn't you? Jordan pulled her arm away. She looked at him with a mix of pity and amusement. I fixed it, Gregory. Liar, Gregory spat. You're done. I've already messaged the ground crew via the text link. The police will be waiting at the gate. You're going to jail for hijacking. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and malice. You thought you could intimidate me? You're a nobody in a hoodie. I am the authority here. Jordan didn't argue. She didn't fight back. She just walked past him, settled back into seat 1A, and put her noise-canceling headphones on. She closed her eyes. Let him think he won. The landing was going to be very, very interesting. The remaining 5 hours of the flight were a masterclass in psychological warfare. While Jordan slept or pretended to sleep under the thin blanket she had to retrieve for herself, Gregory Niles went to work. He was a man who knew how to spin a narrative, and he wasn't about to let his authority be challenged without consequences. He spent the flight moving between the first-class suites, whispering to the high-value passengers. Jordan could hear snippets of the conversation through the gaps in her noise-canceling headphones. Very unstable. I believe she forced her way into the cockpit. Gregory whispered to Mrs. Albright in 1B. Threatened the captain. That's why we dropped altitude. She did something to the controls. He murmured to Mr. Henderson in 2A. "Don't worry. The authorities have been notified. She'll be in handcuffs the moment we touch down." By the time the breakfast service began, which Gregory pointedly skipped for seat 1A, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted from confusion to hostility. The passengers looked at Jordan with fear and disgust. They saw a threat. They saw a woman who didn't belong, who had endangered their lives. "Missus?" Albright clutched her purse every time Jordan shifted in her sleep. Mr. Henderson glared at the back of her head. They were a jury that had already reached a verdict, led by a prosecutor, serving them warm croissants. Jordan opened her eyes as the descent announcement chimed. She felt the change in cabin pressure. Her ears popped. Sarah, the young flight attendant, walked by quickly. She dropped a small bottle of water and a granola bar on Jordan's lap. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, her eyes darting toward the galley where Gregory was watching like a hawk. "He wouldn't let me plate a meal for you." He locked the carts. "It's okay, Sarah," Jordan said, tucking the granola bar into her pocket. "You've done enough. Just, when we land, stay out of the way. It's going to get loud." Sarah looked worried. "The police are waiting." "I heard him call the ground operations manager. He told them we have a level 4 threat on board." "That means armed response, ma'am." Jordan nodded slowly. "Good. I want them to be thorough." The plane banked over the gray, sprawling city of London. The rain lashed against the windows. The landing gear deployed with a heavy thunk. As they taxied toward Terminal 5, the mood in the cabin was electric. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Usually, the end of a first-class flight is a flurry of activity, getting coats, priority bags, polite goodbyes. But today, nobody moved. Gregory stood at the front of the cabin, facing the passengers, his back to the cockpit door. He looked like a warden guarding a cell block. The plane came to a halt at the gate. The seatbelt sign turned off. Jordan unbuckled her belt. She reached for her bag. "Sit down," Gregory shouted. His voice cracked with adrenaline. "Nobody moves, especially not you." He pointed a shaking finger at Jordan. "Ladies and gentlemen, for your safety, please remain seated. Local authorities are boarding the aircraft to remove a security risk." Mrs. Albright let out a dramatic gasp. "Oh, thank God. Get her off." Outside the window, blue and red lights flashed against the fuselage. 2 black SUVs and 3 police cruisers were parked on the tarmac. A jet bridge began to move toward the door, but a set of mobile stairs was also being rolled up to the forward galley door. An unusual move, reserved for high-security extractions. The cabin door opened. A blast of cold, damp English air swept in. 3 officers from the Metropolitan Police entered. They were wearing high-visibility jackets and carrying tactical gear. Behind them walked a tall, imposing man in a sharp charcoal suit, flanked by 2 other men in suits holding clipboards. Gregory puffed up his chest. This was his moment. He stepped forward to greet the police, a smug smile plastered on his face. "Officers," Gregory said, projecting his voice so the whole cabin could hear. "Thank you for coming so quickly. That is the passenger. Seat 1A. She forced entry into the cockpit, assaulted a crew member, and threatened the safety of this flight. I want to press full charges." He pointed an accusing finger directly at Jordan. The passengers craned their necks to watch. Mrs. Albright pulled out her phone to record the arrest. The lead police officer, a stern man with a thick beard, looked at Gregory. Then he looked at Jordan. "Is this the individual?" the officer asked. "Yes," Gregory said, practically vibrating with glee. "That's her, the one in the hoodie." "Get her off my plane." The officer nodded and walked past Gregory. He walked straight up to Jordan's suite. Jordan stood up. She didn't look scared. She looked bored. The officer stopped in front of her. The cabin held its breath. Then, the officer snapped his heels together and saluted. "Dr. Maxwell," the officer said, his voice respectful. "Welcome to London. We have an escort ready for you." Gregory's smile faltered. Excuse me?" Before Gregory could process what was happening, the man in the charcoal suit stepped forward. He walked right past the stunned flight attendant and extended a hand to Jordan. "Jordan," the man said warmly, "I am so sorry about the reception. We were tracking the telemetry from the ground. That reset you pulled off? It was a thing of beauty. We'd have lost the hull if you hadn't been on board." Gregory stammered. Who are you?" The man turned slowly to face Gregory. His eyes were cold, hard flint. "I am Sir Alistair Sterling," the man said. I am the CEO of Regal Air, and I am here to personally thank the woman who saved my flagship aircraft. The silence that fell over the cabin was heavier than the plane itself. Mrs. Albright lowered her phone. Mr. Henderson's mouth hung open. Gregory looked like he had been slapped. CEO? But she's in a hoodie. She has no meal service. She's nobody. Nobody? Sir Alister's voice remained quiet, but it carried a dangerous edge. Mr. Niles, isn't it? You've been with us for 8 years, I believe. Yes, sir, Gregory squeaked. 10 years. Exemplary service. Exemplary, Sir Alister repeated. He turned back to Jordan. Dr. Maxwell, would you care to explain to Mr. Niles who, exactly, this nobody is? Jordan picked up her battered messenger bag. She stepped out into the aisle, standing toe-to-toe with Gregory. She didn't shout, she didn't scream. She just looked at him with the calm, analytical gaze of an engineer looking at a broken part that needed to be discarded. I'm the reason this plane flies, Gregory, Jordan said. I am the lead aerodynamicist for the Boeing Regal partnership. I designed the wings you're standing on. And the reason I didn't have a meal listed? She paused, letting the tension build. It's because I was invited to dine with Sir Alister in London tonight to celebrate the successful launch of this fleet. I didn't need your airplane food. Gregory's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the galley wall for support. But, Jordan continued, her voice turning icy, I don't think I'll be making that dinner, because I can't, in good conscience, do business with an airline that employs staff who profile, harass, and endanger their passengers based on how they look. She turned to Sir Alister. I think we need to review the contract for the next 20 jets, Alister. I'm not comfortable putting my technology in the hands of people like him. Sir Alister nodded gravely. I agree, Jordan, completely. He turned to the police officers. Gentlemen, I believe there is a security risk on this plane that needs to be removed. But it isn't Dr. Maxwell. Sir Alister pointed at Gregory. Remove him. The silence that descended upon the first-class cabin of Regal Air Flight 909 was heavier than the pressurized steel hull itself. For 7 hours, the only sounds had been the hum of the engines and the clinking of silverware on fine china. Now, the air was thick with a tension so palpable, it felt like static electricity. The command from Sir Alister Sterling, remove him, hung in the air for a heartbeat, absolute and terrifying. Then came the sound that would haunt Gregory Niles for the rest of his life. The metallic rasp of handcuffs being pulled from a tactical belt. Me? Gregory's voice splintered into a high-pitched shriek of disbelief. He took a staggering step back, colliding with the galley cart he had used as a barrier between himself and Jordan for the entire flight. You can't arrest me. Do you know who I am? I am the senior purser on this vessel. I am the victim here. She broke federal protocol. The lead police officer didn't blink. He spun Gregory around with practiced efficiency, twisting his arm behind his back. The click-clack of the cuffs locking into place echoed violently off the cabin walls. Gregory Niles, the officer recited, his tone bored but firm. You are being detained under Section 4 of the Aviation Security Act for active interference with flight operations and endangering the safety of an aircraft. Interference? Gregory gasped, writhing against the restraint. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, cutting through the thick layer of foundation he applied so meticulously before every shift. I was protecting the cockpit. I was doing my job. Sir Alister stepped closer. He towered over the flight attendant, his presence radiating the kind of icy authority that can only come from a man who owns the very ground they were standing on. He lowered his voice, a dangerous rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. You weren't protecting the cockpit, Mr. Niles. You were obstructing it, Sir Alister said. Captain Henderson filed a detailed incident report via the ACARS data link the moment we leveled off at 20,000 feet. I've read the transcript. He stated explicitly that you physically blocked a qualified expert consultant, Dr. Maxwell, from assisting during a critical flight control failure. He noted that you threatened her with arrest while the aircraft was in a Dutch roll, a maneuver that could have torn the stabilizer off this jet in under 3 minutes. Gregory's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. His eyes darted around the cabin, looking for an ally. He looked at the passengers he had fawned over for hours, desperate for someone to vouch for his character. I didn't know, Gregory pleaded, his voice cracking. Sir Alister, please, look at her. She was wearing a hoodie. She looked like a scrub. How was I supposed to know she was an engineer? She didn't look like us. Jordan, who had been watching the scene with the stillness of a statue, finally moved. She adjusted the strap of her battered leather bag and stepped into the aisle. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her voice was calm, clear, and carried the weight of absolute truth. "And that," Jordan said, locking eyes with him, "is exactly why you are in handcuffs, and I am standing here." She took a step closer, invading his personal space. "You didn't look for a badge. You didn't check a credential. You looked at my hair, my skin, and my clothes, and you made a decision that almost killed 300 people. You saw a scrub, Gregory. I saw a yaw-damper logic loop. The difference is, my knowledge saved this plane. Your prejudice almost buried it." "Move it," the officer barked, shoving Gregory forward. The walk of shame began. It was a slow, excruciating procession down the length of the first-class cabin. This was Gregory's kingdom. This was the aisle where he had strutted like a peacock, dispensing champagne and judgment. Now, it was his gauntlet. As he was marched past row 2, Mr. Henderson, the businessman Gregory had treated like a king, turned his head away, staring resolutely out the window. In seat 1B, Mrs. Albright, the woman who had gasped in horror at Jordan earlier, pulled her legs in tight. She looked at Gregory, not with sympathy, but with the sharp disdain reserved for a servant who has embarrassed the master. She didn't want his failure to rub off on her Prada coat. Gregory looked at them, his eyes pleading. "Help me. I did this for you. I kept the riffraff out for you." But they gave him nothing. He was no longer the gatekeeper of luxury. He was a liability, a smudge on their travel experience. As they reached the front of the cabin, the heavy cockpit door unlatched. Captain Bill Henderson emerged. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 6 hours. His uniform was rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes, but when he saw Jordan, his expression softened into profound relief. He ignored the police. He ignored his former purser being dragged away. He walked straight to Jordan and extended both hands. "Dr. Maxwell," the captain said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't get a chance to say it properly before. Thank you. Truly. When the stick went dead in my hands, I thought that was it. You gave me my ship back." "You flew her well, Captain," Jordan replied, shaking his hand firmly. "That recovery at 15,000 feet was textbook." The captain nodded, swallowing hard. Then, he turned his gaze to the corner of the galley, where Sarah, the young flight attendant, was pressed against the wall. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, terrified that she was next in line for the handcuffs. "And Sarah?" the captain said, his voice firming up. Sarah flinched. "Yes, Captain? You're the one who breached the cockpit," Henderson said. "You disobeyed a direct order from a superior to get that note to me. You risked your job because you knew something was wrong. That isn't insubordination, Sarah. That's leadership. That's airmanship." Sir Alistair turned his attention to the young woman. He saw the terror in her eyes and offered a warm, grandfatherly smile. "What is your last name, Sarah?" "Jenkins, sir," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "Well, Miss Jenkins," Sir Alistair said, clasping his hands behind his back, "it seems we have a sudden vacancy for a senior purser on the transatlantic route. The position comes with a significant pay raise and a new roster. The job is yours, effective immediately. If you want it." Sarah's jaw dropped. She looked from the CEO to the captain, then to Jordan. Jordan gave her a small, encouraging nod. Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Sarah stammered, fresh tears flowing, but these were tears of relief. Jordan adjusted her bag again. "I think that's my cue," she said. She turned to leave, but her path was blocked by Mrs. Albright, who had stood up from seat 1B. The socialite looked small now, stripped of her earlier arrogance. Her face was flushed with a deep, burning shame. I just wanted to say," Mrs. Albright stammered, clutching her expensive handbag as if it were a shield. "I had no idea. You have to understand, with the world the way it is. You just didn't look like." Jordan held up a hand, stopping the apology before it could turn into another insult. "I know exactly what I look like," Jordan said. Her voice wasn't angry, but it was cold enough to freeze water. "I look like a black woman in a hoodie. But what you need to understand, ma'am, is that I also look like the person who designed the composite wings holding you in the sky. I look like the person who wrote the code that keeps the oxygen flowing in this cabin." She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like a shout. Next time you see someone who doesn't look the part, try saying hello before you dial 911. You might just be talking to the only person who can save your life. Mrs. Albright shrank back, unable to meet her gaze. Jordan turned and walked out the cabin door. She bypassed the jet bridge entirely. Sir Alistair guided her toward the open galley door, where a set of mobile stairs had been positioned, a privilege usually reserved for heads of state. As Jordan stepped out onto the metal platform, the cold, damp London wind hit her face. It didn't feel biting, it felt cleansing. It felt like victory. Below her, on the rain-slicked tarmac, a drama of two worlds was playing out. To her left, she saw Gregory Niles being shoved unceremoniously into the back of a police cruiser. The blue lights flashed against his face, illuminating a man whose career in aviation was over forever. He would be blacklisted, charged, and humiliated. To her right, a sleek black private limousine was idling next to the massive landing gear she had stress-tested in a wind tunnel 3 years ago. The driver was standing by the open door, an umbrella at the ready. Jordan walked down the stairs, her sneakers squeaking on the metal. Sir Alistair walked beside her. "I have a dinner reservation at the Shard," Sir Alistair said as they reached the tarmac, "but I have a feeling you might just want to go to your hotel." "Actually," Jordan said, looking at the police car as it drove away, "I think I'm ready to celebrate." She slid into the plush leather interior of the limousine. The warmth enveloped her instantly. Sir Alistair sat opposite her and reached for a silver bucket. "Champagne?" he asked, popping the cork on a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon. "Real champagne this time. Not the sparkling wine we serve in the cabin." Jordan pulled down her hood. She ran a hand through her hair, letting it fall loose for the first time in 20 hours. She took the crystal flute, watching the bubbles rise to the surface. "Yeah," she smiled, clinking her glass against his. "I think I've finally earned a meal." And that is the story of how a prejudgment at 30,000 feet led to the most satisfying karma imaginable. Gregory Niles didn't just lose his job that day. He lost his reputation, his freedom, and his future. All because he couldn't look past a hoodie. As for Jordan Maxwell, she continues to be a ghost in the machine, quietly designing the future of flight, proving that true power doesn't need to shout, and it certainly doesn't need a suit and tie to be valid. It's a powerful reminder to all of us. Treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, because you never know who is actually holding the keys to the building, or in this case, the keys to the cockpit. If you enjoyed this story of Justice Served Cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder to be kind. And subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a story. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been judged by your appearance? I want to hear your stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.